Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
Once upon a time, Yamini Naidu was an economist. Then, quite suddenly, everything changed. These days, Yamini's built a highly successful career as a storyteller, spreading the word about the power of storytelling for businesses. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Author of several books including Power Play, Game-Changing Influence Strategies for Leaders, Yamini says that influence is a powerful tool, but there's a light and dark side to it. She suggests that it's a bit like fire. You can burn down a village or just cook dinner with it. Yamini would like us all to focus on new ways of influencing people, in good ways, of course. But what does that really mean? And why do we need new influencing strategies now in the way we communicate?
I think just the complexity, isn't it? The complexity of what we're dealing with. I was looking at some BBC data just the other day, and they said 100 years ago, our attention span was 20 minutes. So 100 years ago, this is before the internet, before TV. What do you think current attention spans are? They're down to 9 seconds. 9 seconds. And as soon as I read that, I just felt for business leaders, business owners, because I said, never have we had more amounts of information to convey, really complex information, and never have we had skinnier attention windows. But what was reassuring with the data was it said that 9-second attention windows apply only if you're dealing with, really dry facts and figures, information, data. But the minute you engage with emotion, so the minute you engage with, say, something like storytelling, you get a much bigger attention window.
What's the difference between being influential on the one hand or being manipulative? Because you say, Yamini, that every day we face a choice between one or the other.
I think every day we face a choice between influencing or not. So even people who say, oh, no, I don't do influence, you're then giving up your power. You're becoming powerless. So I think every day we have that opportunity to steer in the direction of good or not. And so often with business owners, the ethical decisions we make, the day-to-day decisions we make and how we deal with people, all of these can have an impact on whether we influence or we manipulate.
Could you describe some influence strategies?
Sure. I'll list about 10 in my book. So soft power. Traditionally, we've often had a military view of influence, the old command and control, which I called hard power in my book. And hard power simply doesn't work because it creates fear. Stuff happens only when you're being supervised. You lose creativity. People don't go that extra mile, with hard power. We then, about in the 1990s, we had the evolution of soft power, which comes to us from the work of Joseph Ney, who's a professor out of Harvard Business School. And he said soft power is using, connecting, collaborating, consulting, which are all terrific and should really be part of any business owner, business leader's toolkit. But soft power, too, takes time. Either it takes meetings, and more meetings. It's slow. And sometimes it's subtle. So then I suggest story power, which is grabbing people's emotion, creating a connection to their heart. And a whole range of tools like the power of love. It sounds a bit like, oh my God, saying love in a business context. But we all know brands we love. When I think of my Apple phone or my Apple Watch, I love that brand. So, if you can harness the power of love as a business owner, that can be a very strong influence tool for you.
Well, how can a business owner start to build new influencing skills?
The first thing we've got to embrace is what I call a learning mindset. Influence is a skill. It can be taught and learned, and we can all get better at it. So my suggestion would be to start to try different strategies and see what works for you and what works for your audience, but also to continue to grow and to challenge ourselves. If you've always used hard power, it's time for a change. If you always use soft power, maybe you need to look at the power of humor or empathy power. So I think that's what sets Power Play apart. It doesn't advocate just one tool, but it advocates about 10 depending on your context.
Well, in your book, you write about context and empathy. Both are important, you say, in the art of influence.
Yeah.
So could you take us through each one?
Sure. Empathy power is a deep understanding of your audience. So it's a deep understanding of, say, your client base. So, for example, Jodie Fox, who founded Shoes of Prey, when she was traveling overseas, she realized, how difficult it is to create custom shoes, to get custom shoes made. And just that moment of thinking, my God, there must be other women, other people just like me, sparked an entire business called Shoes of Prey, which, as you know, is now today a multi-million-dollar business. And the other thing about Jodie is in their workplace. One of their qualities is they want their staff to love being part of that workplace. So they've got both empathy power and love power in action, and it's given them great results. There's a banking startup in America called Simple. And the minute you join Simple, they send you a beautiful thank you email. So the very first contact with you is what I would consider as a customer a love note, but a really positive love note. These are just really practical, small things that businesses can do to use influence. So that for me is empathy power, is really walking in your customer's shoes and not doing it at a superficial level, but doing it in a deep way. The power of context. Context is like oxygen. Without it, your content is doomed to die. So understanding the context for your audience, for your product, for who you're speaking with and your content can just really amp up your ability to influence.
You write about the power of all sorts of other forces, which can help us in our business lives. We talked about love power, humour power, fierce power. Are you saying that that's one that we could try to forget about?
No, definitely not, especially today. Fierce power is the power of being yourself. So it's the power of authenticity. And in a world where there's so much hype and so much spin and so much over-packaging and prettying up, people really connect with a deep authenticity. And Heather, research tells us Australian audiences have the biggest BS detectors. Now, I know this is a very polite audience. I'm not going to elaborate what BS is. So if you're trying to be fake, you're trying to be something you're not, it's immediately going to become apparent.
Yamini, you've built a successful career on storytelling, which was quite a divergence from your first career as an economist. In fact, you're the first and only economist to turn storyteller, I believe. So how does storytelling tie in with new influence?
I hope your listeners don't stop listening when they hear that I'm an economist. I am an ex-economist, so just trying to claw back that credibility. I was then also a senior leader in corporate Australia, and I was always frustrated with why data didn't work to persuade people. So for me, I could see the facts, I could see the numbers, the logic, and yet we weren't able to really engage people, implement strategy successfully, create the change we wanted to see. I came across the work of Stephen Denning, who's the founder of business storytelling. It's a field out of America. And as soon as I read his book, a light bulb exploded in my head. I went, my God, this is the missing link. I then did some market research with other senior leaders, and they all said two things. They said, we know great leaders tell stories, but we don't know how to. So just on that brave premise, I co-founded a business that does storytelling. And I find that leaders, the minute they're in the room with me, they just have this aha moment. They go, we do the logic really well, but we don't have a lot of tools that allow us to engage people's hearts and connect with emotions. And that's where storytelling can help. Storytelling in business has to have a purpose. So it's very different to storytelling in the pub. It also has to be authentic. So this is, again, that authenticity. So your stories have to be true. And your stories have to support the data. So data, I find the data has the facts, the numbers, and the figures. They're great to engage people's head, but not to engage people's hearts. So together the two create a complete picture.
So every business owner needs to tell their own story.
Totally, and they need a suite of stories, Heather, around their products, around their customers, around their founder stories. They need a suite, a library of stories should be the idea that we embrace. So in addition to everything you do, so don't have a binary view of this. You still need, product brochures, your digitization, your information on your internet. But in addition, we need stories. That's the richness, that's the heart piece. That is what people will remember, engage, and retell. That's what they'll share with their friends and family.
That was Yamini Naidu, professional storyteller and author of Power Play, Game-Changing Influence Strategies for Leaders. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Executive producer is Heather Dawson. Producers are Nick Schilberger, Chris Ashmore, and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts and Belinda Trimboli. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au That's mazars.com.au.